Hello and welcome. So this is going to be my first impressions of the expansion here a day and a half into it, uh, as well as I'm going to rank how strong I think each of the classes is going to be. And I will say, except for my bottom two classes, I think the other seven are going to be very good. I think we're going to see a lot of them. But there has to be a ranking, and I gave them one. So what do I think of the meta? I think it's nice. I think Blizzard has put a lot more work into this expansion than they have in the previous expansions, like Mean Streets of Gadget Sand and Karazhan. I think Blizzard did a pretty good job of giving certain classes that needed help some help, and certain classes that didn't need help, you know, they didn't give them that help. Uh, with a couple of exceptions, but there always will be some, yes. So I think Blizzard put a lot of work into this expansion. I'm very excited. I also think I'm very excited for how wide I think the meta is going to be. In Mean Streets of Gadget Sam, we basically had three decks, right? We had Pirates, we had Reno Jackson, and we had combos. Uh, which I'll throw a rogue into that combo deck. So that was pretty much it, right? I think there are going to be a lot of archetypes. I think we're going to see a lot of archetypes return from Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, as well as I think we're going to see a lot of new archetypes. I think people are going to find ways to make a lot of different decks work, and I think the meta is going to benefit from that. So I'm very excited for this expansion. I think it's going to be very good. So let's go into the rankings. Like I said, the bottom two classes I don't think are going to see much play. But even then, I don't think they're absolutely terrible. I just think they get outmatched by the other classes. So at number 9, I have Priest. And I think maybe a lot of people would disagree with me on this, but I've put a lot of thought into this, and I think Priest is going to struggle a lot. So people were pretty excited, as was I, for the Priest Quest Awaken. Awaken the Makers, and certainly summoning 7 Death Rattle minions isn't that hard, right? You throw N'Zoth in, and in theory, it sounds great, it sounds very strong, but then you remember that, you know, what does it do? What is your win condition? Can you, can you survive long enough to do this against aggro? And I think when you think about it in those terms, you realize that this quest isn't as strong as perhaps we thought it would be. So, Amara, 5 mana, 8, taunt, battle cry, set your hero's health to 40. Now this sounds fantastic. This sounds like it's a super Reno Jackson, right? But, you know, I don't know if you remember this, but it turns out it doesn't matter what your health is if you can't control the board. The reason this was okay was because warriors could control the board. That was why it was called Control Warrior. They removed everything you played, they build up armor, and then they just won a long game. How do you do that in Priest? How do you control the board? I think when you think about that, you pretty quickly realize that Priest can't control the board, and therefore having 40 health is meaningless. When your opponent has 12 attack worth of minions and you have 40 health, that means nothing, right? They're just going to hit you in the face 3 times and you're dead. So, yeah, Priest, I think, is going to really struggle in this meta. Well, sure, you might say, but N'Zoth, that's the win condition, right? But this card is no longer in the meta, and this card was kind of the card you wanted, right? So, what are you getting with N'Zoth? Crystalline Oracle? Blood Mage Thalnos? Pretty big swing turn, right? And certainly, I get it. I get that, you know, it's not always going to be, you know, it's not just these cards, right? Priest will also have Shellraiser and Karen Bloodhoof. But I mean, that's kind of best case scenario, right? And how big of a swing turn is that? How powerful is that? Will that win you the game in this new meta? And I would argue that it's not powerful enough, and no, it will not win you the game. Let's talk about Shaman briefly. What's Shaman doing? Turn 6 Fire Elemental, turn 7 Blaze Caller, turn 8 Calamos. Now that's pretty powerful. Meanwhile, back in Priest, we're still 2 turns away from playing N'Zoth and getting a Karen Bloodhoof and a 2/6 taunt. Um, how does this Priest even compete? I don't think it can. I think this, as fun as it is, as much as I really want this to be strong, as much as I really want this to work, I don't think it will. And I think Priest is going to be suspiciously absent from competitive play. And I think on the latter, I actually think we're going to see Resurrect and Purify. We saw Resurrect before when Priest was really bad because people really wanted Priest to work. So they tried to innovate and find a deck archetype that would work. Resurrect did okay. It wasn't good, but it was okay. And I think people are going to try and make that work again. And I really think people are going to try and make a Purify deck work because I think that is going to be stronger than an Awaken the Maker's Priest. Alright, so moving on to the second worst class, Rogue. So, Rogue lost a lot in this expansion. In particular, they lost Tomb Pillager and Conceal. Now, Tomb Pillager was just a very strong 4-drop that had the upside of fueling a higher tempo turn later with the coin, and pretty much found its way into almost every Rogue deck. Conceal is really kind of the glue that held the Miracle Rogue deck together and allowed Rogues to have that one really huge, big turn because you couldn't deal with the Stealth Gadget Stand or Questing Adventure, right? So with these 2 cards gone, Rogue is weaker than they were. And what did they really get? Now, certainly Rogue did get one of the best cards out of the set, and one of the best cards probably Blizzard has made in Vile Spine Slayer. Now, a lot of people have sort of likened this to Assassinate and said, hey, look, it's better than Assassinate because, one, it can target minions that can't be targeted by spells, and also you're getting a free 3/4 body. Okay, that's true. All of that is true. But nobody really ran Assassinate. So, can we really make that as a fair comparison? What about a card that does see play, like Blast Crystal Potion? Now that's a good card, right? Everybody has been super happy slamming down Ragnaros or Ysera, and then Warlock just plays Blast Crystal Potion, and then, they play a 6-drop. So, yeah, that's a pretty good card. But when you look at them side by side, one develops a 3/4 body, and one destroys a mana crystal. So yeah, it's a pretty good card. But it doesn't matter how good this card is. If there is no deck to play it in, then there's no deck to play it in. People are gonna, they're gonna try and make the Caverns Below work. But the problem with this quest is that Rogue has always been a class that aims to have high tempo, right? They want to do a lot of things in one turn and just do more than you can deal with, right? Either through Miracle or just, playing very efficient removal and very efficient minions, right? So how do you make this caverns quest work? How do you complete the quest? Well, you run things like Shadow Step, Ferryman, Brewmaster, right? It's not that hard to make the quest work. But here's the problem. If you're running these cards in your deck and you're playing them, that's anti-tempo, right? You're playing a 1-1 and then you're returning it to your hand and then you're playing the 1-1 again. And that's not exactly what Rogue has ever aimed to do. Um, and it I think what we're going to find is that it's too slow. Um, well, rogues are doing this gimmicky stuff and, playing their little shenanigans. Meanwhile, their opponent is going to be building a board, and they're going to be, by the time the 5/5s come out, it's going to be too late. Yeah, when your opponent's playing 5/7s and 4/8s and 8/8s, well, guess what? Those 5/5s don't mean that much. Certainly, if you can complete this quest and turn your deck into low cost 5/5s before your opponent can see solid control of the board, certainly this is a very, very powerful effect. But when you're running a deck with cards like Ferryman and Brewmaster, I don't think you're going to be able to reliably and consistently do that. Therefore, I think Rogue is going to struggle quite a bit. So, like I said, I think every class after this is going to see quite a lot of play, and I think they're going to do just fine. But there has to be a ranking, so on to number 7, Druid. So, I'll admit, when I first saw Jungle Giants, I thought that this was bonkers, right? Well, I should say, I thought Barnabas was bonkers. But then I realized, first, it doesn't affect the minions in your hand, right? So you need to complete this quest, and then you need to draw minions from your deck to have high tempo turns. And certainly you're going to do that with cards like Nourish. But you can only run 2 Nourish in your deck. And I think those high tempo turns are going to be too few and far between, and I don't think they're going to be powerful enough to make this deck incredibly strong. And it's slow too, right? I think this is one of the slower quests to complete, and because of that, I think Druid is going to be near the bottom of the playable classes. Certainly Jade Idol will probably still see play, and again, I think this deck will see play. I don't think it's terrible, I don't think it's unplayable. I just think it doesn't match the power level of most of the other classes. So, on to number 6, Paladin. Paladin didn't really get a lot in this expansion. However, when your class legendaries are Tyrion, Ragnaros Lightlord, and Sunkeeper Tarim, it's hard to make an argument that Paladin will be bad. It's just really, really hard. So, I think mid-range Paladin is going to see a resurgence. I think it's a deck that's going to do just fine. But I think it's going to do just fine, right? It's not going to be spectacular. It's not going to be game-breaking. It's not going to make people cry themselves to sleep. It's just a deck that people will play and find some success with. But I think there are other classes that are much more powerful, such as my number 5 class, Hunter. And this is one that I think a lot of people would disagree with me on. People will say, "What? You're crazy. Hunter got so many good cards in this expansion. They got, they got so much. They're going to be so good." And sure, Hunter did get quite a lot. Hunter probably, arguably, got the most out of any class. However, in Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, how would you rank Hunter as a class? Probably the worst, yeah? So, when the worst class in the game gets a lot of good cards, is that going to catapult them to number one? Probably not. I think Hunter is going to be exactly the middle of the pack. They're going to be average. I think they're going to be good, certainly, but not necessarily as good as some of the other classes. So I want to talk about the Marsh Queen because this is a quest that I think requires some very delicate deck building. Because the problem is you have to balance having enough one drops and card draw to reliably complete the quest, but you also have to have, not so many that your deck is just too weak, right, and too susceptible to, you know, various pings and whatnot. Because when that happens, when you start dumping your hand and playing a bunch of stuff on the board, and you're like, "Yay, I'm winning," and then your opponent plays Arcane Explosion, Volcanic Potion, so on and so forth. And Mage got a particular card that could make these cards cost 0 and 1 mana respectively. Yeah, so uh, it's dangerous, and I don't think it's bad. I think somebody will find that balance, um, so that you're not, your opponent's not playing 5/5s and then you're top decking Fiery Bat, right? That's pretty bad. That's yeah. So, but somebody's gonna make this work. Somebody's gonna find the right deck build for it. I think somebody's gonna find a way to make Beast Hunter work, and it's gonna be okay. And I think somebody's gonna find like just a normal, your typical mid range hunter, and that's gonna work. But I don't think any of them are going to be super strong. I think they're just going to be somewhat successful, and that's why I put Hunter in the middle of the pack. So moving on to my number 4 pick, Warrior. Now, I think this probably would surprise a lot of people. I think a lot of people would put Warrior lower, but the Taunt Warrior has been an archetype that's been really close to working for a long time, just hasn't quite been there yet. So, with Plume's Heart and this expansion, I think Warrior has gotten enough that I think this is going to be a very good deck, mostly because of one card. Nah, Bolster's still probably pretty bad. But it turns out Sulfuris is pretty good. So, I don't know. I think having a hero power that deals 8 damage is probably pretty good. I think a 3 mana 4/2 weapon is probably pretty good. And I think this Taunt Warrior is going to be pretty good. So, not only that, not only is this just good in a vacuum, but you have to remember what the meta's like, right? And what the meta has always been like. A lot of aggro. People always try to make aggro work because you have certain people that really enjoy control and really enjoy that back and forth, and trying to where every draw matters, and you're trying to outskill your opponent and get a slight edge that you build on and turn into a win. And then you have those players that want to finish the damn game, right? So aggro is always going to be a thing, and as long as aggro is a thing, I think this Taunt Warrior is going to be there to shut it down. And because of that, I think Warrior is going to be pretty high up in the meta for quite some time. But I still think there are classes that will do better. But yeah, once somebody figures out the right balance of taunts, removal, and threats, I think this is going to be a very powerful deck. So moving on to my number 3 spot, that is Shaman. So I don't really have a lot to say about Shaman. We've gotten to know Shamans very well over the last 6 months or a year, and I never hated Shaman as much as I think a lot of people did. In my opinion, Shaman was unplayable for 2 years, so I'm perfectly fine with Shaman having their turn. I think the problem is when Blizzard continually makes good Shaman cards. When Blizzard gives the best class in the game, the best cards in the game, that's when things become a problem. But I have no problem with any class being at the top or any class being at the bottom. Everybody's going to have their turn, right? So, that being said, I think we're going to see a lot of Jades, we're going to see a lot of Elementals, and we're going to see a lot of Murlocs. Uh, yeah, the Shamans are going to be everywhere, but I don't think they're going to be as painful as they were in the past. I think they're just going to be a very common, very good class. Moving on to my number 2 spot, that is Mage. And I think open the Waygate. We're gonna have Waygate mages and we're gonna have Elemental mages, right? And I think both of these archetypes are going to be left standing when the dust settles. Once the meta, kind of resolves itself, and people figure out what they're going to play. I think both of these are going to be archetypes that people will enjoy playing, and I think they're going to be strong. Um, I mean, we've talked about Waygate to death, right? You run some combination of giants and or burst, and well, guess what? An extra turn turns out to be pretty good. It's game ending. And in terms of the elemental deck, I don't think it's going to be as strong as the Waygate, but I still think it's going to be strong. I think it's a lot of people are going to play it. Turns out water elemental's pretty good, and it's kind of going to be like the tempo mage, right, of this expansion. So I think we're going to see both of these mages quite a lot. But I don't think mage is on top. I think the top class in the new Journey to Un'Goro expansion is going to be Warlock. So, like Mage, I think Warlock is going to have two main archetypes that people are going to play, but I think they're both going to be devastating. So the first is the Lakari Sacrifice deck. It bothers me that I didn't center that, but that's fine. So, oh, that's why. Okay, so it turns out Nether Portal's pretty good, right? And it's stronger than I first imagined it. I thought, a couple free 3/2s, that's pretty good value. That's long-term value that, it's going to be somewhat hard for people to deal with. But I think I underestimated and didn't really have a true appreciation for how difficult that is to deal with. Because these are 2/3/2s that you're just getting for free, in addition to your turn. And given the things that Warlock can do in a single turn, especially in a discard, tempo-based Warlock deck, yeah, this is going to be pretty good. Doomguard, Clutch Mother, and, all the other Librarians and the Soulfires and everything that's going to be flying around. We're going to see a lot of this, and it's going to be really, really annoying. The other Warlock deck I think we're going to see is, of course, Handlock. I think we didn't really appreciate how good we had it in the Reno Lock days. And even that was one of the top decks, right? But guess what? Now they have 2 Mountain Giants, and they have 2 Twilight Drakes. And in addition, I think we're going to see Humongous Razorleaf and possibly even Ancient Watcher. Probably not, but maybe. And then we're going to see, Faceless Shambler and Faceless Manipulator and Sun Fury Protector and Defender of Argus. And how do you contest that board, right? When we go back and talk to when I was talking about Priest and what Priest is doing, this is what I'm talking about. How does Priest contest this? Okay, yeah, sure, they have, Shadow or Death, but they only have 2, and they have to draw them. Other than that, yeah, N'Zoth doesn't look that strong now, does it? When you're looking at a turn 4 Mountain Giant into, turn 5, for example, Humongous Razorleaf, Sun Fury Protector, that's just a dominant board state. And I think it's going to be tough for a lot of classes. I think it's going to be tough for everybody, even the good classes, and that's why I think Warlock is going to be the top dog for quite some time. So that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think. If you think, oh, you're an idiot because, uh, you know, Warlock's not gonna be that good. Like it's all about Hunter, or why do you think Priest is so bad? You're an idiot. N'Zoth is gonna work out. You'll see. And then Warrior's gonna be terrible. Whatever you may think, let me know. And thanks for watching.